What is up, Packers Nation? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Just want to take a quick moment before we start today just to say thank you. Just kind of getting an opportunity to wrap my head around all of the numbers that we saw for draft season, both on the YouTube channel, on the audio channel. Just all of it has been overwhelming, amazing. So I just wanted to thank you all for all of the amazing support all throughout draft season. It is a lot of time, effort, and energy that goes into it. It's a labor of love. I love doing it, but just wanted to say an extra huge thank you for making it as successful as it was. So appreciate you guys. We've got a lot more to go over, of course. We're still doing some of the deep dives about this draft class. Before you know it, mini camps and OTAs, and it's still going to be a amazingly fun offseason coming up. So looking forward to that, but just wanted to shout you guys all out for making it such an amazing draft season. Also, shout out to Joseph Bester for becoming a all-new Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube member. If you haven't checked out those YouTube memberships yet, make sure to do so. Also, one of the things I get asked quite a bit is like, hey, Andy, I can't sign up for Pack-A-Day memberships. I don't have the ability to do so. Well, what's the best way I can support the channel? Of course, liking, subscribing, those 5-star reviews, those things help a ton, but also make sure you're helping out our sponsors as well. Whether it's Habish or Rotier, Luigi's Pizza, always helping us out on the YouTube channel. We appreciate them a ton. Make sure you're supporting them. On the audio side, we do a lot with Prize Picks. So use that promo code Pack-A-Day. That helps out a ton. Just clicking on the advertisements or checking out our sponsors, whatever it might be, that helps the channel a ton as well, and helps us get additional sponsorships in the future. So that is a great way to support the channel if you're looking for a way to do so. We always appreciate our sponsors a ton. And if you have the opportunity to support them, we would greatly appreciate that as well. Meanwhile, in the housekeeping item standpoint, or from a housekeeping item standpoint, I should say, I get asked a lot, or I get complaints a lot, or there's comments in the comment section of, Andy, listen, your face is beautiful. We love staring at it, but why are you not putting YouTube clips or highlights, any sort of NFL film when you're doing these deep dive breakdowns, or just on any of your channel in general? Why are you not putting clips? The best channels are doing that. You're not wrong. A lot of the great channels are in fact doing that. And if you look at what Brett Kohlerman's going through right now, he is going through a strike on his channel, numerous strikes on his channel for putting college football clips on his channel, breaking down film. And now he has to go through a huge legal issue for doing that. It is a very easy argument to make that me breaking down football clips is fair use. And that is certainly the legal precedent that is set in a lot of these situations. And my hope is that Brett will be able to utilize that, but he has made that argument already. And now he ends up in this huge legal battle. There can be financial ramifications. His channel can get a strike. It becomes a massive nightmare. So not to get too inside baseball here, but that is the reason that I do not put clips on the channel. Thanks to you guys, the channel is insanely successful as it is. And it is obviously why I'm not, or why I'm able to do this full time and not having a full-time job. And I'm not willing to risk the channel getting taken down, which can happen for copyright issues, or for shows to get, demonetized, or for that monetization to have to go towards the proper copyright owner for posting those clips. If from an NFL standpoint, they have not been striking people, as far as I can tell, in a long time. I probably could post NFL clips on stuff and have it not be an issue. That being said, it doesn't mean that things won't change over time, or that the NFL at some point might go and say, hey, we can make a lot of money, or we can have a lot of issue, or make it so that these channels are not using NFL clips in the future by going through and striking all these channels and backdating it and trying to, reclaim all this money. At some point, that could be a massive issue for me if I do that. And if at some point the NFL goes back and tries to do something like that. So right now I could probably get away with it. And clearly a lot of channels are getting away with it. That might not always be the case. And right now with college football film, it's why the QB school does not usually post college film to his channel, because he puts it behind Patreon, because the college football people go after it a lot. Coleman's had it. I saw people under Coleman's tweet say, hey, they've had issues as well. So just long story short, you're not going to probably see highlights. It's the easiest thing to do, by the way, to put highlights over what I'm doing, to actually have film right now. Like if I could literally just click two buttons, by the way, and I could be showing you film of players, and it's unbelievable content, and it's so easy to do, and it would increase the channel 1,000-fold. That's probably a little bit aggressive, but you get the point. It would add so much to what I do. I'm just not willing to take that risk, have the copyright issues, have the legal issues, have the strikes, the channel potentially getting taken down. I can't do that. So if you're ever wondering why I do not use clips, highlights, all of that stuff, that is the reason why. And other channels right now are going through the ringer because they have posted college football clips. So long story short on that, but I just wanted to give you a heads up because I do get questions on it a lot. I get comments on it a lot. I would love to put film out there. I just, at this point in time, cannot take the risk in doing so. All right, some other just news and notes. ESPN posted their post-draft power rankings. Green Bay ended up 8th on that list. What's interesting about that is if that were to finish the way this regular season, they were 8th on the list. Chiefs were 1, Eagles were 2, Bills were 3, Lions were 4, Ravens 5, Commanders 6, Rams 7, and Packers 8th. If those teams were to finish that way this regular season, that would give the Packers the 6th seed in the playoffs as the 8th best team. The Lions would win the North in that situation. The Eagles would win the East. The Rams would win the West. The Commanders would have a better wild card than them because they are 6th on the list. And then some team would win the South, which would give them the 4th seed. So they would be 6th in the playoff pecking order, but the 8th best team in the league. So it is a very tough NFC. Of course, having the Lions and Vikings. The Vikings were 9th, by the way, 1 spot after Green Bay. Lions and Vikings in the same division is going to make it very tough, but it just goes to show you why it's going to be so important to try to come out on top in the NFC North, because you are fighting a uphill battle if you can't win the North. It's going to be quite the battle in the NFC North with Detroit, Minnesota, and even Chicago again. So buckle up. But 8th best team in the power rankings, but that would put them again 6th in the playoff seeding if the season were to actually finish that way. Meanwhile, NFL draft, Washington, D.C., 2027. Remember, 2026 is going to be in Pittsburgh. We now know 2027 will be in Washington, D.C. Should be they're going to put it right in the mall. That is going to be awesome. It should look amazing. Really looking forward to that. Great venue for it. And that, like I said, should be an absolutely epic scene in the Washington, D.C. mall, right by the monument. Unbelievable backdrops. Sign me up. That's going to be really, really cool. That gets us to our main topic for today. And that is going to be the biggest remaining questions for your 2025 Green Bay Packers. Now that free agency is all but over and the draft is now over, we have an idea of what this team is really going to look like this upcoming season. But there are, for me, 12 questions that remain that are pretty significant questions that will probably alter the state of the 2025 Green Bay Packers for better or worse. And we're going to go for each of these questions, what the best case scenario is and what the worst case scenario is. So let's kick things off right away at number 12 with special teams. The Rich Bisaccia era has not been great. Now, everyone to a T talks about Rich Bisaccia, the assistant head coach, as unbelievable. In fact, Nate Hobbs talked about it again when coming to Green Bay. We heard it with Josh Jacobs. Like, people want to play for Rich Bisaccia. They love Rich Bisaccia. I believe as somebody in the organization as a whole, he is a big-time value add. He brings an entirely different intensity and energy to the coaching staff as well. I like Rich Bisaccia on Green Bay staff. But the Rich Bisaccia special teams experience has been pretty underwhelming through his tenure in Green Bay so far. And there is not a ton that would lead you to believe that Green Bay is all of a sudden on the verge of a special teams renaissance in 2025. I hope I'm wrong, but there's not a ton that would lead you to believe that that's the case. There are some positive signs, though. First of all, you have Brandon McManus back. Green Bay should have a legitimate, really good kicker throughout the entirety of the season, barring injury. That is a great sign. Daniel Whalen had his ups and downs, but I still believe in him as a good, solid punter. Ups and downs at punter in Green Bay is going to happen because you end up in situations where it gets cold and windy and all these things happen. And punting in Green Bay plus a game in Chicago is not the most ideal situation in the world. But I still have faith in Daniel Whalen. I think he's a good punter. Hopefully he can even be better in 2025. And it looks like they're going to have their full battery for a second consecutive season for the first time in a while. Whalen, McManus, and Orzik should be the three from snapper to holder to kicker. And again, it's been a while since that's actually been the case in Green Bay. That is a positive. They also go out and add some players that theoretically should be value adds to this special teams. Christian Welch at linebacker. That is a potential value add on special teams. Isaiah Simmons is a stud special teams player. He should add a ton of value if he can make the team. McCole Hardman as a potential punt returner also has some kick return value. He could potentially help. Stavion Williams projects as somebody who could be at least a kick returner and maybe help on some of the coverage units as well. Colin Oliver projects as a potential special teams demon. He hasn't done it a ton, I should say. It's a projection, but he does project as somebody who could be a really good special teams player. Then Micah Robinson, their 7th round draft choice as well, I think could be somebody that is in play on coverage units also. So they have added some players in free agency in the draft that could legitimately help this Packers special teams. They also have some returning players. Ketan Oladapo, Zane Anderson, Tyron Hopper, Isaiah McDuffie, John Fitzpatrick, Chris Brooks, Malik Heath. Those are all players who could make up the core of this special teams as well. So they are not in this barren wasteland of no special teams players. It seems they have their kicker, their punter, and their long snapper. It seems that they have some specialists like a Christian Welch and Isaiah Simmons, amongst others, Zane Anderson, who could really help this group as well. But it all remains to be seen. And can they actually put it together and be a good special teams? The best case scenario is they do. And Green Bay becomes an actual real life top 15 special teams unit. I'm not pressing anything past that. If they can be top 15, sign me up. I will gladly take that. To me, that is somewhere, whether that's 15 or 1 or anything in between, I will take that as a best case scenario. Worst case, it's just your average, usual Green Bay special teams that's ranked somewhere between 30th and 32nd in the league. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they're much better than that, but there is a wide range of outcomes for this Packers special teams, and hopefully it can be on the better side, but it remains a major question. Number 11, Christian Watson's return from injury. We're getting some really good updates. We heard an update from Matt LaFleur that everything's progressing great, that he's a freak, that he's attacking it well. We heard from Christian Watson that everything is trending in a very great way. Those are all great updates and in what you exactly want to hear at this point of the year. What that means for his actual return date and how he's going to play when he comes back, that all remains to be seen. The positive updates are encouraging, but the range of outcomes for what actually could happen with Christian Watson is still wide ranging. You could have him come back somewhere around week 12 and look really good. Look like Christian Watson, add a big time wide receiver to this unit, around week 12. And that's like your kind of big trade deadline acquisition, right? It's a little bit after the trade deadline, but that would be huge. Getting Christian Watson and adding him into a receiver room that already looks really good on paper is massive. Adding that speed element, a deep ball element, it would be perfect right before the playoff push and then ready for the playoffs. I mean, that would be amazing. The worst case is he has any sort of setback, or maybe he's not back till week 15 or 16. And when he does come back, he looks like 80%, 75%, 70% of Christian Watson, whatever that percentage is. It's not 100%. And it's nice that he's out there and he's playing, but the truth of the matter is he's not adding a ton of value because maybe the speed's not the same, or he just doesn't feel comfortable out there. Maybe some of the end arounds and stuff like that are not really working the way that you would hope, and maybe just doesn't have that same burst and explosiveness. So that's kind of the best and worst case scenarios, right? Best case scenario, he comes back maybe even a little bit early and he looks phenomenal. He looks like Christian Watson. That would be huge. And the worst case is it gets some sort of setback, he returns later, or just doesn't look like himself, or both. Again, wide range of outcomes there. Hopefully he can come back and make a big impact when he does return, and then they'll make that roster decision on him when he's a free agent in 2026. But getting good intel on him and how he plays at the end of this year will go a long way in helping them make that decision and determination. Number 12 is just Luke Musgrave. What is he? What can he become? Is he a good tight end? I don't know. I don't think any of us do at this point. In 2023, played in 11 games, had 34 catches for 352 yards and a touchdown. Not bad numbers, right? Especially for only 11 games, 3 catches a game, averaging, about 10 yards per reception. Had a touchdown. You would have liked to have seen a little bit more red zone productivity, but overall, like a solid rookie season. You would have liked to have seen him play more games, but overall, you're not too upset with anything. Then in 2024, he comes back. He misses 10 regular season games, only plays in 7 games, and in those 7 games, only has 7 catches for 45 yards and 0 touchdowns. I think maybe one of the most, under talked about stat lines of 2024 is Luke Musgrave. 7 catches, 45 yards. That was it last year. That is unbelievably underwhelming. Like, even when he did catch a pass, it was a little over 6 yards per reception. I would have liked to have seen it if he played in 7 games, at least one play that went 45 yards. Much less only 45 yards, much less on 7 receptions. That was a really bad season for Luke Musgrave, in large part due to injury. But even once he was back, it just never felt like he could get integrated into the offense or add anything of value. In 2023, it looked like he was adding some level of value. There was the stumbling. It wasn't always clean. It wasn't always efficient, but he was a solid tight end. Like you felt like, all right, you have something here. You can continue to develop this. And then 2024 was basically a completely lost season for Luke. So in 18 games so far, he has played 41 catches, or he's played in 18 games, 41 catches, 397 yards, and 1 touchdown. Very underwhelming. I think there is a really talented player there, but whether or not they can get that out of him remains to be seen. I think the best case scenario is he is a legitimately really good number 2 tight end, adds more to this receiving offense, and just adds some pass catching prowess to his game and shows some of the run after catch and speed that we thought he was going to have coming out of college, and he becomes maybe more of a red zone weapon. I think that's the big thing. Can he be somebody that they can trust a little bit more in the red zone? The worst is that, let's just be real, he's a bust. He doesn't turn out, doesn't really do anything this year, and you're looking for a new number 2 tight end next season. Those are, again, very wide range of outcomes. Hopefully it's the better of the two. I think it will be. I think he's going to add something this season. I hope he can just stay healthy. I think he attacks this thing the right way. Matt's talked about his toughness on numerous occasions, but it is time for him to be something in this offense. Hasn't shown enough in 2 years, large part due to injury, but now is the time, and hopefully he can become a really good tight end still in Green Bay. Number 9 is Javon Bullard. What's his role on this team? Is he just a safety? Is he just a nickel guy? Can he be a bit of both? And what's his ceiling as a player? There were moments last year where I'm like, oh, they got a big time player here. And I really like the way that he attacks from depth. He's a physical player. He is not afraid of contact, and he really rallies to the football and kind of plays the game the right way is how I would define it. There were other plays where I'm like, oh, this coverage is not great. I'm not sure if he can stay in that nickel role. I think he might just need to be a safety, but there were some plays at safety too where he got himself out of position. There's advantages and disadvantages to him at safety and at nickel, and what he is, what he becomes, and how much he plays this year, I think is going to go a long way in defining him as a player. So what is his role? If he's a safety only, he's in a little bit of no man's land because I don't expect him. He's certainly not going to beat out Xavier McKinney, and I don't expect him to beat out Evan Williams. I think those two are just locked in at your safety spots moving forward. If he's just a nickel, that's fine. I still think you're going to play Hobbs there a bit, and I'm not sure that he can play in more obvious passing downs, but you can make a role for him there without a big issue, right? So that's not a massive problem. But where does he play? What does he become? What is his upside? And then how does he get on the field? If Jair is back, you could see a world in which Jair and Nixon are your outside corners. Hobbs takes that full-time nickel role, and Williams and McKinney are your safeties. And he's just your 6th defensive back, which isn't the worst thing in the world, right? If he's good, I don't care that they have more good defensive backs than they need. That's totally fine. You can work with that. But if he can't really find that role for himself and he doesn't take a step, he might find himself in a situation where it's just really difficult to get on the field. Best case scenario is he develops into a legit safety, a legit slot guy, or maybe a little bit of both. And he is a huge value add. He plays on maybe some of those early nickel downs as a, kind of a bigger nickel. And he makes a big time impact this season. The worst case is he doesn't take a step. He doesn't really find that defined role. And it's really difficult for him to get on the field, and he makes almost no impact whatsoever. Hopefully, again, it's the better of the two, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm still very bullish on Javon Bullard. I think he's going to be a really good player, but this is a really big season for him. Not like the situation with like Luke Musgrave or LVN, who we'll talk about momentarily, where it's like this is year 3 and there's a lot of urgency, but I still think there's a really good player there, and hopefully Green Bay can find a better way to get that out of him in 2025. Number 8 is the offensive line alignment. We know a decent chunk of this. Well, I think we're pretty certain that Banks is going to be at left guard, Jenkins is going to be at center, and Zach Tom is going to be at right tackle. I think we know that pretty well. It feels like left tackle could be Rasheed Walker, and he's probably the leader in the clubhouse. Jordan Morgan, who is going to compete for it, maybe rotate a little bit, maybe earn the spot outright. And then even I think Anthony Belton could get his name in that conversation as well, depending on just kind of moving him around and what position maybe fits best for him. So there's one of 3 players who could be, or there's 3 potential players who could be starting at left tackle. And that's Walker, Morgan, or Belton. And then I think there's 2 players who could theoretically be starting at right guard. And that is Sean Ryan. I guess 3, right? Sean Ryan, Jordan Morgan, or Anthony Belton. Same thing kind of there. I think Morgan is more likely left tackle at this point, but it's not impossible if Walker just immediately wins the left tackle job that they couldn't move Morgan back to right guard and now have a basically a three-way battle between Ryan, Morgan, and Belton for that right guard spot. So you've got, basically 4 players for 2 spots. What I think is going to end up happening is I think you're going to end up with a sort of rotation at left tackle with Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker at left tackle. I think you're going to end up with some point of a rotation at right guard with Sean Ryan and Anthony Belton at right guard to get you ready for 2026, where Morgan's probably your starter at left tackle and Belton's probably the starter at right guard. But nothing's set in stone. Nothing's determined. They could figure out a variety of different ways to maneuver these pieces around. We know Jenkins and we know Zach Tom have a ton of versatility. You could put Banks at right guard too. So there's so many different ways that this could go, and how it ends up, I still think is a bit of a mystery. Your best case scenario is you have 7 starting caliber offensive linemen with your whoever's the starting 5, and then let's just say Belton and Morgan are your backups, that you still feel comfortable with both of those guys as true legitimate starters. You've got great depth there. The worst case scenario is that nobody of those 4, Walker, Ryan, Belton, or Morgan, really stands out. Banks is your left guard, Jenkins is your center, Zach Tom's your right tackle, but it's just sort of a merry-go-round at left tackle and right guard, trying to find the right person for that spot, and nobody sort of claims it at either position. It's tough to figure out, or of all the worst case scenarios we've gone over so far, this one's got to be the toughest. I don't think it ends up that way, because we've seen Rasheed at worst be a pretty solid left tackle, and we've seen Sean Ryan at worst be a pretty solid right guard. So to get to a situation where you don't have any answers at either of those spots is pretty, I think, unlikely. But probably more of a worst case would be Belton and Morgan just don't take a step, and Walker and Ryan just kind of win by default. And those 2 players just don't look like they're ready to compete and start in 2025. Hopefully that doesn't end up being the case. Number 7, I alluded to earlier, that's LVN. Listen, I think there's this idea that LVN has just been a total bust so far, that anytime he's on the field, it's just it's a bad scenario. And I vehemently disagree with that. He has by no means lived up to expectations. He's been no means worth a top 15 pick. And he is trending closer to, I guess, overall bust from a expectation standpoint than a big time player, right? I don't see yet a world, and it's not impossible, but I'd be fairly surprised if all of a sudden LVN just turns into a stud, big time defensive end / pass rusher, right? It's not impossible, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. But I think this idea that LVN can't help you, or that he's useless, or that he's just a terrible player, I think that is a bit more towards the realm of absurdity. He is very clearly a rotational defensive end. Now, again, you didn't spend the 12th pick or whatever it was to try to get a rotational defensive end. That is going to be a bit of a bummer if that's all that he is. No question about it. But I still think he's a valuable piece of that defensive end rotation, regardless of whether he lives up to expectations or not. He's had 902 snaps in his career. 494 of those have been pass rush snaps, with 42 pressures and 10 sacks. That is not a terrible player. That is a rotational defensive end in the NFL all day, every day. Had a 10.5% pressure percentage in 2023 that went down a little bit last year to 9.0% in 2024. But to me, this is where you find out if he can have a bit of a breakout, a la what Rashawn Gary did in year 3, or if you just realize this kind of is who he is, a la Nick Perry and Dayton Jones in year 3. In year 3, Rashawn Gary had a significant breakout, had 9.5 sacks per PFF that year. Nick Perry and Dayton Jones had 3 sacks, and we're starting to sort of plateau and kind of realize, all right, this just is kind of who they are. Perry had a little bit of a breakout a couple of years later in a contract year, but outside of that, this kind of ended up resulting in exactly who they were in players. So to me, best case scenario for LVN is that year 3 breakout, a la Rashawn Gary. And the worst case is that you sort of just plateau and realize that they're okay rotational players, a la Nick Perry and Dayton Jones, but there's not going to be anything special there. This is a big year for LVN, and just sort of, setting expectations for who he is as a player, setting that ground floor. I'm hopeful, but I'm not super optimistic at the same time. I think he's going to be a solid rotational piece. I think he probably does take a little bit of a step this year, but I'm not expecting anything breakthrough. But man, do I hope I'm wrong. And I still think there's a ton of talent there for LVN. Hopefully he can put it together this year. Number 6 is drops. This might be a surprise. Catching the football, very important as a receiver. It's actually one of the key parts of the job description is actually catching the football. It's like the Jerry Seinfeld, I know you know how to take the reservation. I don't know that you actually know how to, hold the reservation. That's really the most important part of the reservation. For reception, I know you know how to, catch the pass and run after the catch, but actually catching it in the moment is actually the most important part of the reception. It's kind of a big deal. Green Bay last year, 30 drops in 2024 per PFF. They were in the top 5 in drops in the NFL this past year. Jaden Reed had 10 with a 14.5% drop percentage or, drop rate. Dontavian Wicks had 9 with an 18.0% drop rate, basically dropping a pass almost 2 times out of every 10 passes thrown his way. Just an absurd number. Romeo Doubs had 5 drops and a 9.4% drop rate. Again, basically 1 out of 10. So Jaden Reed's dropping, 15%, 18% for Wicks, almost 10% for Doubs. And how does Green Bay go about fixing this? By adding Savion Williams, who had a 10.4% drop rate in college, and Matthew Golden, who had a 9.4% drop rate in college. They didn't exactly go out and add guys that have the most reliable hands in the history of college football. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to continue to really struggle with drops, but it doesn't give you this huge vote of confidence either. Oddly enough, Christian Watson, who's been known to have some questionable hands, has actually had very good hands over the last couple seasons and has not had drop issues. And now you're kind of taking him out of the lineup for a huge chunk of the time. And you're ending up with Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Savion Williams, and Matthew Golden, all who have had drop issues at some point over the last couple of years, 4 of which had drop issues just this past year. That is a concern. It is a problem. I think it was Ryan Wood who put together the numbers. It was something like, I'm going to probably get this wrong to some extent, but like if you just took like half of Jordan Love's drops this past year and made those into completions and put them on Jordan Love's stat sheet, he goes from like a middle quarterback to like a top 5 quarterback in the league. It is a huge difference maker. So Green Bay has got to get these drops under control and figure it out so it's not a problem in 2025, or it is going to be massively frustrating once again. Best case scenario, drops get cleaned up and Jordan Love goes on to have an epic season. He prospers with receivers who can actually catch the ball. And worst case is I think there's a real chance that Green Bay could lead the league in drops again. And you sort of have to reevaluate the position again in 2026 because of all the drops that happened in 2025. I would love to look you in the eye and be like, yeah, the problem should be solved. I don't know based on what. They added more players with sort of drop issues. Now, Golden played really well this past year in college and had really no drop issues. He plucked the ball out of the air. Hopefully that's behind him, but it has been an issue in his 2 other seasons when he was at Houston. So I can't say for sure, like it's just going to be clean moving forward. Savion Williams, we know had issues with it. Hopefully Wicks and Reed and Doubs can put those issues behind them, and hopefully it's not a big issue for Golden, and Williams can kind of get it cleaned up a little bit, but this is definitely a concern going into this season. Number 5, the depth behind Kenny Clark. We've talked about this quite a bit. TJ Slayton, gone in free agency. Kenny's coming off the worst season of his career. There's not a debate there. That was by far and away the worst season of his career. Meanwhile, behind Kenny Clark, players that you can play as like that true, if we want to call it a nose tackle or run-stopping defensive tackle, whatever you want to call it. Warren Brinson, a 6th-round rookie, and Nazir Stackhouse, a undrafted free agent rookie. There's nobody else. Let me say that one more time. There is nobody else that can play that role. You have Kenny Clark and 2 rookies, and it's not like a 1st and a 3rd round rookie. It is a 6th round rookie and a UDFA. There's no guarantee Nasir Stackhouse even makes the team this year. Technically, I'd say there's no guarantee Brinson even makes it, but I think he will. And if you don't know already, go and listen to my Brinson video. I'm very high on Warren Brinson, what he can bring to this team. So I'm excited about it. I think there is legitimate upside there, and I think he can play some of that Kenny Clark role. But my goodness, you're putting a lot of faith in Kenny Clark being healthy this year and playing well this year. And if he either doesn't play well or has injury issues, you're putting yourself in quite a predicament with any of the depth behind Kenny Clark as sort of a true nose tackle or run-stopping specialist. There are not a lot of options on this team, and really there's only 3, Kenny Clark, Nazir Stackhouse, and Warren Brinson. The best case scenario is Kenny stays healthy, plays great, and one of those rookies steps up and shows that he can be, a legitimate backup behind Kenny Clark. The worst case is the Packers just don't have a run-stopping defensive tackle. Kenny gets hurt or has even a worse season this year than he did a year before, And you're surprised your 6th-round pick in UDFA were a 6th-round pick in a UDFA for a reason and are not ready to come in and play big-time snaps as a true nose tackle / run defender. That this is a big-time potential shatter point for Green Bay, meaning if it goes well and Kenny plays great, you feel really great about the position, but you are like millimeters away from it being sort of a catastrophic situation and just having a really difficult time stopping the run if there's a Kenny injury and Brinson and Stackhouse are not up to the task. You are in a bit of no man's land in that situation. Number 4, pressure. Now, statistically, Green Bay was not terrible this past year, getting pressures and getting to the quarterback. In fact, I think that this always stuns people. Did you know Green Bay was tied for 8th in sacks last year? Tied for 8th. They were in the top, 25% of teams, the top quarter of teams in sacks. They had 45. And by the way, 4th place, if you're wondering, like 4th place had 49 sacks. They were 4 sacks away from being in tied for 4th place in sacks. There were 3 really good teams, and then everyone, was basically between like 49 and 39. And 49 was in 4th place, 39 was in 18th place, and you found yourself usually somewhere in that range. But Green Bay was tied for 8th with 45 sacks this past year. Not terrible by any means, but you have to take it into consideration in the context into consideration. They did a lot of that in 2 games, one of them being that Tennessee game with Will Levis where they had 8 sacks. They were not consistent with it. And when they faced good teams like Detroit or Philadelphia who had good offensive lines, those quarterbacks had all day to throw the ball. There's the play where you go back and you watch Jalen Hurts just sit in the pocket for like 12 seconds and find, I believe it was Jahan Dotson in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. So the pressure was not consistent. Gone is TJ Slayton. Doesn't really affect your pressure percentage at all. He was not a pressure guy. In comes Warren Brinson, Barron Sorrell, and Colin Oliver. 3 rookies, 3 day 3 rookies. Brinson gives, I think, maybe a little bit more juice than TJ Slayton as a pass rusher, but it's not going to solve any problems. Barron Sorrell could potentially be a rotational edge rusher, not a huge pressure percentage guy, probably not going to remake this defensive group in any sort of major way. Colin Oliver is intriguing. He's a true pass rush specialist with a very high win rate, but he's very small, he's very fast, and he's a little bit of an outlier / unique piece. Just how good he can be in that role in the NFL is a complete mystery box. So just counting on that to be the guy that improves your pass rush is a little bit, wishful thinking probably at the best. And there's no guarantee that he can come in and add anything to this pass rush group. He might end up just being an off-ball linebacker in the NFL. That's a possibility. The only other change, in comes DeMarcus Covington. He is going to be the one that is tasked with getting the most out of Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kenny Clark, and Devontae Wyatt. Those need to be the 4 that are leading this pass rush unit. Those need to be the 4 that step up and play the way that they are capable of playing and making this into a much better, more consistent pass rush group. Whether that can happen, who the heck knows? I'm hopeful, but it is a major question mark. Your best case scenario is that the rookies impress and Gary, LVN, Clark, and Wyatt perform up to expectations. DeMarcus Covington's as advertised and really remakes this defensive front in his image and makes it so much better than it was a year ago. The worst case scenario is the Packers are once again non-existent as pass rushers in big games, and they need to completely make over this unit in 2026 and make it so that there's a much better pass rush unit there. We'll see. Hopefully DeMarcus Covington is up to the task. Number 3, don't need to spend a ton of time on it. You know it. I know it. We know it. It's the Jaire Alexander situation. I'm recording this at 2:00 p.m. on Monday. So barring any sort of crazy news later on Monday, we still don't have a Jaire Alexander solution. It's pretty simple, right? Best case scenario, he's in Green Bay, he's healthy, and he plays at or near an all-pro level. That's a pretty good best case scenario. I would love that best case scenario. The worst case scenario is twofold. Either he's back in Green Bay, either on a revised contract or on his current contract. He gets hurt right away again, plays his somewhere between 4 and 8 games or maybe even less, and you pay him all this money and he barely plays, and when he does play, it's not really moving the needle in any way. Or worst case part 2, you cut him, get nothing in return, and he goes out and tears it up somewhere else. There's a lot of worst case here. Probably somewhere in the middle. Probably either he plays this year, misses some time, but plays and is good, maybe not great. Or you cut him, he goes somewhere else, or trade him, goes somewhere else, has a fine season somewhere else, but it's nothing that you're really regretting. Those are probably the more likely outcomes. But man, could go in so many different directions. Trade, release and he plays amazing, release and he's injured the whole year, plays and he's injured the whole year, stays and he's injured the whole year, stays and he plays the whole year. Like, this is just, again, a beautiful mystery. Who knows what way it's going to go? And it's a massive question mark as of right now as to what actually happens with Jair Alexander. Number 2, we can talk about a little bit more and is very related to number 3. And that's just the cornerback depth chart in general. Right now, as is, Jair Alexander, Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, Carrington Valentine, Micah Robinson, Kalen King, Kamal Hadden, with Javon Bullard popping down as well. I could get behind that. Jair is your 1, Keyshawn as your 2, Hobbs as your 3, Valentine as your 4. That feels good. And now you've got like Robinson, Kalen King, Kamal Hadden fighting for your 5 and 6 spots. I'm totally cool with that. Plus Javon Bullard. Like, you feel really good about that. No issues. If Jair's healthy, of course. But Jair goes away. Maybe Javon Bullard can't really hang in that nickel role. And all of a sudden, you've got like Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, and Carrington Valentine, and not a whole heck of a lot else. And you're an injury or 2 away from being in real no man's land in your secondary. And I said it yesterday as well. Is this a defensive back room, or a corner room, I should say, that you can win with? Or is it one that you can win because of? Or is it a cornerback room that you can't win with at all? That's the wide range of outcomes for that position. I'm hopeful that these guys can play well, with or without Jair. I like this corner room a little bit more than I think most people do without Jair, but it still leaves you really questioning just how good they can be. And sort of what we talked about with the offensive line and with the pressure is, like, in big games, I guess it was more the pressure group, but in big games, it was more noticeable. And with the secondary in big games last year, it was far more noticeable. Maybe Nate Hobbs is awesome and he can be a huge part of fixing that, but you would like one more piece. It would be great if that piece was Jair and he could be healthy, but that is a huge question mark in and of itself. Last but not least, number 1, the biggest question going into this year is Jordan Love. I think we've got a decent amount of answers through 2 seasons with Jordan, and it is very clear he is a starting quarterback. And I think it's very clear as well that he's a good starting quarterback. Like, he's not a bottom tier NFL starter. 2023, 372 for 579, 64.2% completion percentage, 4,159 yards, 32 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, a 96.1 rating, led his team to the playoffs, got a playoff win, almost picked up a win against San Fran in the divisional round. Like, he played really good football, especially towards the end of that year. Like, that's a good starting quarterback, even this past year, right? Injured the majority of the season, never quite felt like himself. His numbers last year, at the end of the year, 268 of 425, 63.1% completion percentage, 3,389 yards, 25 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and a 96.7 quarterback rating. That's still a good stat line. Not where you want it to be, not what you would have expected, not the jump you wanted him to take, but in large part due to injury. Considering he was injured the entire year, 3 different injuries, MCL, groin, and thumb, not the worst season in the world, and missing games, within that as well. So this is a good quarterback. But to me, in the third year, and I talked to Pete Doherty on Pack-A-Day Radio on Monday. If you haven't had the chance to go listen to that, I highly recommend it. Pete brought up that Mike Holmgren always talked about year 3 as a starter is when you really learn what you need to learn about the quarterback. Year 3 as a starter for Aaron Rodgers, 6th year, just like Jordan, 2010. I don't know if you know what happened that year. They won a Super Bowl. He was 312 of 475, 65.7% completion percentage with almost 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and a 101.2 quarterback rating. In his third year as a starter, Brett Favre, 1994, it's when he really started to break out, 62.4% completion percentage, 3,882 yards, 33 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. You saw some really unbelievable seasons from both Aaron and Brett, and they really sort of set their expectations for the rest of their career. This is the expectation setting year for Jordan Love, assuming he stays healthy. Just how good can he be? Is he a legitimate top 5 quarterback contender? Or is he more of that middling quarterback that you can't win because of, but you can win with? That to me is the difference here. The best case scenario for Jordan Love this year is an MVP candidate, like a legit MVP candidate. I think that is within the realm of possibility this season. In fact, I don't know what the odds are, but I would not hate putting that bet down. The worst case is the inconsistencies show out again. You get some really good Jordan Love performances, but you get some really frustrating Jordan Love performances. And it's just more of like, man, the good looks really good, but the bad looks concerning. And can he ever put it together enough to put a postseason run together to actually win a Super Bowl? And again, kind of that moniker of we can win with this guy, but we probably can't win it because of this guy. That's the worst case. Probably not in the world of like you need to move on or start looking at another quarterback or anything like that, but it would affect him in the future as like that next quarterback conversation, right? And you might start looking in a couple of years at maybe drafting a lottery ticket or two just to see if something hits where you could go in a different direction. But that again is a pretty crazy difference. MVP candidate or solid quarterback, but you have some questions now as to whether or not he can be the guy that leads you to the promised land. I think that's what we learned about Jordan Love this season, and nothing could be more important to the future of the franchise than that. It is the single 1A biggest question. The 12 biggest questions to recap: special teams, Christian Watson's return from injury, what can Luke Musgrave become? Where's Javon Bullard and what is his role in this season? The offensive line alignment, LVN, can he have a breakout season? Drops, been a problem, can they fix it? Kenny Clark and the depth behind him, can you get more pressure in 2025? The Jair situation, the cornerback depth chart, and what is Jordan Love ultimately as a quarterback in this league? Really fun, interesting questions. And the answers to those questions probably determine if this is a Super Bowl contending roster or if this is a roster that is still a few tweaks away from being able to contend at a high level. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members: Mo State of Minnesota, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brendan Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Ritaka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gassford, Dylan Patscott, Bobby Santoro, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Razul Douglas Time, Jake Koner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winkle-Stinkle, Jen Wright, Ian Hewell, and Matt Geiger. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.